Hey everybody, welcome back to Introductory Biology. We are going to get down and talk about mechanisms of evolution. If you go to your PowerPoint slides, you're going to see a video link to the mechanisms of evolution. So there's 5 different mechanisms of evolution. You will see the link and you'll be able to type it in. It's actually a TEDx video and it's called The 5 Mechanisms of Evolution. It is a Paul Anderson video clip. You can take a look at it, and it is going to review for you the different mechanisms of evolution. So small population size, genetic drift, bottleneck, number 2, non-random mating, 3, mutation, 4, gene flow, and 5, natural selection. So he's come up with a really cool way in order to describe evolution and a unique way for you to remember that the 5 different things that are involved in evolution are small population size, which is genetic drift, a non-random mating, mutation, gene flow, and natural selection. So take a look at that video and you will be good to go. Perfect. So now let's move on to something called reproductive isolation and what creates a species and what prevents 2 different species from actually mating with one another. And so a definition for a biological species is a unit of a population in which genes flow as naturally as possible. And so if you think about humans as being a species, humans have been able to intermix their species, have been able to intermix their genes for a really, really long time. We have actually been able to flow our genes from one individual to the next, and we've been able to do this kind of uniquely with migration, and we've been really unique in that we've now put air flight into a way of moving our genes long distances from one spot to the next. So you can actually hop on a plane and fly to Bora Bora and mate with somebody by the evening. And so that's a really grand way of mixing up your genetic material, extraordinarily long distances. So if we're talking about types of mechanisms that maintain reproductive isolation, there's 2 different ways. There's mechanisms that we call pre-zygotic and mechanisms that we call post-meiotic. So these are ways that prevent populations from actually mating with one another. So if you think about it, let me see if I can get a shape up here. So we have an egg. That's an egg. Make it work for you. And this is going to be a sperm. My sperm should be smaller. There's no way of making it smaller, so what I'm going to do is be tricky, and I'm going to put a tail over here and make this my sperm and make this my egg. And so mechanisms that occur that prevent mating are what we call pre-zygotic. So mechanisms that occur before sperm and egg come together are what we call pre-zygotic mechanisms. So before the zygote comes together, so pre-zygotic are pre-zygotic mechanisms. And let me draw a line. So once sperm and egg come together, sperm and egg create a zygote. Oops, forgot to change my shape. Ooh. So there we go with the zygote in red. So sperm and egg come together, they create a zygote. And any mechanism that prevents the development of a viable egg into an adult form, we call that a post-zygotic mechanism. So post-zygotic mechanism, meaning post or after fertilization has actually taken place. Okay, so post-zygotic, after, and pre-zygotic means that prior to sperm and egg actually coming together. So let's first take a look at pre-zygotic mechanisms. So one of the first types of pre-zygotic mechanisms is habitat isolation. And so habitat isolation is very easy. It means that the habitat between the two different species is different from one another, and they're unable to mate. So we're looking at two different species of squirrels, and one squirrel lives on the north rim, and the other squirrel lives on the south rim, and they are unable to breed with one another because they live in two different habitats, one on the south and one on the north. So even though they are both squirrels, there's no mating that takes place between the two of them. There's no fertilization that takes place. Hence, their habitats are isolated between one another. The next type of pre-zygotic, meaning before fertilization takes place, is something that we call temporal. And temporal means time. Okay, so that's a kind of a fancy name, if you will, for time. Okay, so I want you to, I'm going to put the word time right here. So temporal means time isolation. So in this case here, the red species of sea urchin, what they do is they will actually release their gametes, I don't know, between midnight and 7 a.m. And so that's for this red species. The pink species, on the other hand, will release their gametes, their sperm and egg, between noon and 6 in the evening. So what they're doing is they're separated by time. So if you look at this graphic, the graphic shows you that here is the red species releases its sperm and egg at one time of the day, and the other species releases its sperm and egg at the other time of day. And so they're isolated from one another. They don't intermix, if you will, because they're releasing their gametes at different times of the day. And so one of the species will, release their sperm and egg and fertilize each other's eggs at this time, and the other one releases its sperm and egg and is fertilizing each other at this time of day. So they're isolated from one another by time. The next one is what we call behavioral isolation. Okay, so these species are divided from one another behaviorally. So all of these flycatchers look alike. And what happens is the females can actually tell the difference between the males because of the way they call, because of the slight little differences in the way that they might behave, or peck at the ground, or do a slight little difference in their dance. So even though they may look relatively similar, they are slightly different species of flycatchers. The females can actually tell the difference in them in the way that they behave. So behavioral isolating mechanisms. The next is what we call morphological. So all of these are pretty straightforward. Make a box instead of a circle. Seems to be a lot easier for me. So the next is called morphological. And in morphological, it's kind of fun because I get to say adiagas. And what this is a lock and key mechanism of an intermittent organ in a species. And so in insects have an intermittent organ called an adiagas, and that is a copulating organ. And so all copulating organs, penises if you will, have to be able to fit and match the reproductive tract of the female. And so if the intermittent organ doesn't match and fit like a lock and key into the reproductive tract of the female, then copulation, fertilization is not going to be able to take place. And so for every single species, the female's reproductive tract is an exact match of the copulating organ of the male. If it doesn't match, then fertilization of that egg will not take place. Another mechanism that can keep species apart is gametes. And so a lot of times people that are first starting out in biology think that the shape of sperm is all the same. People think that there's a round head to a sperm. People think that there is kind of a square mid-piece to a sperm. And, oh my God, I'm doing such a good job here, that there is kind of a squiggly tail to a sperm. And interestingly enough, that really is only kind of the shape to mammalian sperm. In bird sperm, the bird sperm head is actually shaped like a sickle. And so that's the head shape to the sperm. Then that sperm has got like a mid-piece to it, like yay, and then it's got a tail. Okay, so that's kind of like bird sperm. Rat sperm is shown here. Rat sperm has got like a hook to the head to it, and then it's got a mid-piece, and then it's got a tail. So every single sperm is species specific, and then the egg also, the exterior part of that egg is species specific. So really, in most species, only the sperm can fertilize the same species of egg. And so we don't have very many species that have that ability to cross species and make a hybrid, although there are a couple, and we will talk about that in just a couple minutes. So this is looking at post-zygotic mechanisms. So if in fact we do have species that are able to have sperm and egg come together, what then? What do we do? How do we prevent those babies from making other hybrids into the population and for, you know, genes to go awry? And so the majority of species, if they do breed and make a hybrid, then the hybrid either dies or the hybrid is sterile. And so we have something that's called reduced hybrid inviability, and that is A right here, reduced zygote inviability. And that is where if there is a hybrid that is produced, then that egg will fail to develop or fail to reach maturity. And this is typically in plants. And so I'm going to type plants after here. So typically we see letter A here in plants. Hybrid sterility, and I'm sure you've all heard of this because this is actually the one that you see in mules, hence the picture of the mule off to the side, is where we have a donkey that breeds with a horse, and then the mule is actually sterile. So I'm going to draw that down here at the bottom. So B right here is when you have a donkey plus a horse, and it equals a sterile mule. Okay, so that's letter B. And then letter C is what we call hybrid breakdown. And hybrid breakdown is also in plants. So in hybrid breakdown, the offsprings of the hybrids have reduced viability or fertility. So usually what happens is the offspring, each generation then is less viable and they're less fertile. and each successive generation has reduced fertility, reduced fertility, reduced fertility, and then eventually they will be sterile. So A and C are typically in plants, and then the middle one is in what we see in mules, and obviously the mules are sterile. And this right here is something that a lot of students come to me and say, well, what about the Tigon and what about the liger? Well, this is what we call hybrid collapse. And these are typically what humans actually bring together, because these species are actually, when you bring a lion and a tiger together, they're usually on different continents naturally, and they're not even in nature, they're not even on the same continent. And so what I've done is I've written kind of on your sheet for you to read in your PowerPoint notes. I've kind of written in depth about the ligon, which is the male tiger, and the liger, which is the male lion. And so, tigers and lions and lions are in Africa and tigers are in Asia, so these matings are absolutely humans bringing those matings together. And so I've written in depth about this, and so you can go back to your PowerPoint notes and read about this. I got my PhD working at the St. Louis Zoo, and I've gotten a lot of questions concerning hybrid collapse and bringing these species together. I typically don't think this is something that we should do. I think this is kind of sad for the Tigon and the liger, because these are not healthy individuals that are actually produced from these breedings. These are very, very weak individuals that are actually produced. Humans do this, and I think it's pretty sad. So, okay, well, that is mechanisms of evolution, short and sweet. So if you have any questions, let me know. Shoot me an email, pop into my office, give me a call on the phone. I'd love to talk to you. All right, you guys are almost done with this semester. I'm proud of you. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.